Excellent. So thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon, and welcome to our special guest, Andrew Garlick, who I will have introduce himself in just a moment for those of you who do not know him. Part of the reason that Andy and I wanted to have this webinar today was because one of the most frequent questions I get from my clients, my small business, healthcare and non-healthcare clients alike, is, Gina, what kind of insurance should I be getting? Now, I want to make it very clear, I am not an insurance broker. When it comes to advice on coverage, types of insurances, what's an appropriate fit for your business, you have to rely on your insurance broker for that type of advice and counsel. What we're trying to focus on here today is just as a small business owner and as counsel to small business owners, what insurances do I recommend that you seek advice about from your insurance broker? What insurances do I and Andy recommend that you get more information about and price out and look into getting for your business? For those of you that don't know me, my name is Gina Campanella. I am the principal attorney at Campanella Law Office located in Midland Park, New Jersey. I am licensed in New York, New Jersey, Vermont, and Pennsylvania. And I have clients in all of those states that have small businesses. And I have been in practice since 2005. Campanella Law Office has been open since 2015. And I focus my practice on corporate law with a passion for representation and working with small businesses, solos, healthcare practices, and entrepreneurs. And I'd like to have Andy introduce himself very quickly before I start going over some of the general insurances that I recommend.
Thank you, Gina. Hi, everyone. I am Andy Garlick, and I am the owner of the Garlick Group. The Garlick Group is a consultancy that works with very small businesses, people like yourself, in the areas of cybersecurity compliance, digital transformation, and general IT support. We have a number of products and offerings that can protect you from the cyber criminals that are out there. And if you happen to be regulated by a governmental agency, and many people aren't even aware that they're regulated. If you ever get audited or get in trouble, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes, fines for not being compliant with the cybersecurity regulations can put you out of business in an instant. So we want to talk a little bit today about how we mitigate the various risks using insurance and also by tightening up your organization to make sure that it's fully protected against things that you can protect against.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy. So I think Andy probably has the most to talk about as far as cyber insurance and cyber protection. So we're going to save him for last or second in this scenario. And I'm going to begin just by talking about some insurance policies that I recommend all of my business clients, again, and this is healthcare and non-healthcare alike, look into when they are first starting or expanding their private practice or their private business. So the first insurance, which is probably the most common that almost everyone knows about, is general liability insurance. General liability is your slip and fall, your personal injury. That's what's going to cover you if somebody comes onto the property of your business and gets injured. Somebody is somehow injured in some way, during the course of you providing your services. And one thing that is very important to understand is even if you do not have a physical location, if you go to other locations and provide services, you still need a general liability policy. And that's something where, I tell my clients, make sure you have a general liability policy and then discuss with your insurance broker what the appropriate levels of coverage are for you based on, your gross receipts, what services you're providing, how you're providing them, and what locations you're providing them in. So general liability really is the first and foremost. That is probably the easiest one, I'll say, that most people do come to me and they know that they have to have, and they already have. Under kind of that umbrella of general liability, you also want to have something called errors and omissions insurance. Now, before I continue, I just want to make sure everyone is aware there is a question and answer box. If you have any questions about anything, as Andy and I are going through the presentation this afternoon, please feel free to put your questions in that box and we will be happy to answer them. So in addition to your general liability policy, you also want to make sure you're covered for something called errors and omissions. Errors and omissions is important because that is your insurance policy that's going to cover you if somebody feels that they were provided subpar services or inappropriate services and damages were caused to them due to the subpar inappropriate services that you provided. Now, this may sound a little bit like professional liability insurance, but it is not professional liability insurance. That's something separate for those who are licensed professionals. E&O insurance goes beyond professional liability. For example, this could be if you are a graphic designer and you design an original logo for a business and you present it to them, they love it, they purchase it, they start using it, and then all of a sudden a company in California sends them a notice that they need to stop using the logo you designed for them because it's too similar to that company in California's logo that maybe they have trademarked and they do, interstate practice with that logo. Okay, that would be, if that client then came and made a claim against you, that's where your errors and omissions insurance would protect you. Another insurance that I recommend that all of my clients have, whether or not they have employees, and that's where this conversation gets a little bit interesting, is workers' compensation insurance. I recommend workers' compensation insurance even if you are a solo and you are the only person working for yourself. It is incredibly inexpensive to get a workers' compensation policy in most scenarios. And what a lot of people don't realize is that you can have yourself covered. And if you get injured on the job working for your own company, there are workers' compensation benefits that you can access. So a lot of times insurance brokers just assume that the person who owns the business is electing to not have themselves covered under their workers' compensation policy. I encourage all of my clients to have that conversation with their insurance broker, even if they do not have employees, and have the conversation if they do have employees about having themselves covered. And then once you have that conversation with your broker, you can always obviously weigh the positives and the negatives and make an educated decision. But what I want my clients to avoid is the situation where the broker says, hey, do you have any employees? And you say no, and then they don't even bring up workman's comp as an option. Or they just automatically check off the box saying that you don't want owner coverage on your workman's comp policy. Because I personally feel that having owner coverage does have a particular value that is well worth the additional price that you're paying. So that's definitely a conversation you should be having with your insurance broker. If you are a licensed professional, for any of you who are on the call today or listening to this on the posted recording, if you are a professional who requires professional liability insurance, so for example, myself, I'm an attorney. I have professional liability insurance as an attorney. For my physician and provider clients, you all have professional liability insurance as well. You always want to make sure that you have your professional liability, it's in place, and it is for appropriate coverage. When you're determining appropriate coverage, you want to look at things like what a statute of limitations might be for someone to make a professional malpractice claim against you. And you also want to take a look at what someone's potential exposure for damages could be from a financial perspective if they were to make a claim against you for professional malpractice. You also want to make sure you're asking your broker questions such as, will my insurance company pay for my attorney's fees over and above my limits of coverage, or are my fees included in those limits of coverage? Okay, I have had clients get into a situation where they didn't realize that the attorney's fees were included in their limit of coverage. They had a very low limit of coverage. And by the time they got to the point to negotiating an appropriate settlement, almost their entire coverage had already been eaten up by those attorney's fees. So these are all important questions that you want to ask your broker, and these are all important conversations you want to have with your broker when you are deciding what kinds of insurance policies to buy to protect yourself and your business. Now, the last one I want to talk about before I turn it over to Andy to have a more in-depth conversation specifically about cyber insurance is an insurance called EPLI. That is short for Employment Practices Liability Insurance. This is an incredibly important insurance that a lot of people do not have. They don't know it exists, and they don't realize why it's important to have it. This is something that I actually, anytime I have a new client come on and we start the initial review of how their business is structured, how they're set up, what they have in place to protect themselves. When we get into that insurance conversation, I will always ask them, do you have an EPLI, Employment Practices Liability Insurance policy? And very, very frequently, the answer I get is either no, or, oh, doesn't my general liability cover that? And the answer to that is no. Many, if not most, general liability insurance policies will not cover you for employment practices liability. If you do have a general liability policy that does cover you for employment practices liability, I would hazard a guess that the coverage is very low. And once you and I discuss that on a one-to-one basis, I would I would be very inclined to believe that I would probably recommend getting a separate standalone employment practices liability policy because the protections that general liability policies generally have for that type of thing are very low to the point where they're almost useless. So what is employment practices liability? Employment practices liability covers you in the event that you have an employee or a former employee who initiates a suit against you for doing something discriminatory against them. And this is generally, these are generally suits initiated by individuals who are part of legally protected classes, okay? Women, minorities, individuals who are based on gender identity, okay? Sexual preference, things like that. So these are all various protected categories. And these are all ways in which someone can potentially make a claim against you, saying that you did something to them, either as an active employee or as a former employee, that was discriminatory on this basis. It also would apply to people with disabilities, okay? If you have an employee who has a disability and they decide to make a claim that you are not appropriately accommodating their disability, this would be your employment practices liability insurance as well. This is something that I do recommend that my clients at least have a conversation with about with their brokers, even if they are true solos and they do not have a single employee or contractor, just so it is on your broker's radar that it's something you're aware of. And then it kind of ticks the box that the broker will then kind of circle back to it with you during those annual reviews where you either sit like this on a Zoom or have a coffee or a telephone call with your broker, review your policies and make sure that they are still appropriate for you and your practice. So I do advise my clients to at least have a conversation, open the dialogue with their brokers about EPLI insurance. And I do highly recommend that clients who only have contractors and do not necessarily have W-2 employees look into obtaining an EPLI policy as well, because you could be in the situation where somebody who is an independent contractor, and who has been more than happy to be paid and treated as an independent contractor for years, gets upset, feels that something discriminatory has happened, and decides to institute a suit against you as if they were an employee. You still have to defend that suit. I'm also an adjunct professor at Seton Hall School of Health and Medical Sciences. I teach MHA students. I teach the law class. And one of the first things I tell them is you need to understand that, especially in the state of New Jersey, you can sue a ham sandwich for not having enough ham. And that ham sandwich is going to have to spend at least tens of thousands of dollars proving that it has enough ham, even if it's a completely baseless complaint. So don't think that you don't need these policies because, oh, well, I would never do that, or I would never be in that situation. Even if you could somehow protect yourself in such a way that you would viably never be in this situation, you still would have to defend a lawsuit brought against you and get it to the point where the court throws it out for having no merit. You can't just ignore something because it doesn't have any merit. In fact, that actually ends up getting you into a lot more trouble. So that's an overview of the 5 major insurances that I typically recommend to my clients that they look into, that they have an in-depth discussion with their insurance brokers about, and that they determine, what with their insurance brokers, what an appropriate policy would be to keep them covered and protect them in their practice and in their business. Now, the 6th big one, which a lot of people don't think about, many more of my healthcare clients think about it than otherwise, but I think a lot of my non-healthcare business clients don't even realize it's something that should be on their radar. And this is cybersecurity and cyber insurance. And that's why we have our friend Andy here today, because the conversation about cyber insurance and cybersecurity is a little bit more in depth than this is what I recommend you speak to your broker about, this is what it is, and this is what it does. And I'm going to turn it over to Andy to explain a little bit more about cyber insurance, cybersecurity, and why the two work hand in hand.
Thank you, Gina.
Very welcome.
I'm going to share my screen. Just give me 1 second to find it. So I hope you can all see that. So I'm going to talk a little bit today about cybercrime and cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is a relatively new product to the insurance industry. So a lot of people don't know about it, and it's been around for about 10 years. Those who jumped on the bandwagon early on were able to get it, and were able to get it for a pretty low price. Both those issues of availability and price have changed significantly, particularly since COVID. So what is the problem? Everybody, whether you're a large corporation, a family, or a small business, as all of us on the call are, we are all dealing with 2 ticking time bombs. And either one or both of the time bombs could go off at any time unexpectedly. The first time bomb is the bomb of cyber threat. In our internet world, in our internet economy, with everything connected, there are thousands and thousands of criminals out there who are just looking for opportunities to make money by stealing data, by getting into your accounts, or just there are young people doing it for fun. They just want to destroy you because they know it's fun. They get a kick out of it. The second ticking time bomb with all businesses is regulatory fines. Now, some people have a general knowledge of cyber threats because it's in the paper almost every day. You don't think it's not going to happen to you, but it is. But most people don't understand that the other time bomb is that the government is putting more and more laws and more regulations that encumber businesses, and running afoul of any of them could cost you significantly. So let's talk about the cybercrime. Each year since 2001, so we're going back a considerable time, the monetary damage caused by cybercrime has been increasing exponentially. By 2020, it reached 4.2 billion. That's the amount of money that was stolen and the amount of money businesses had to spend to recover their data, to rebuild their networks, and to rebuild their reputation. And that number is just the reported cases. At least half of the cyber attacks in the US currently go unreported. People are embarrassed. They just want to get it behind them. They don't tell the government. They don't tell anybody. So that 4 billion number could be considerably higher. In the first half of 2020, and I'm using 2020 because that's the good year that I can do a baseline from, there were over 4 million direct denial of service attacks. Now, what is a DDoS attack? Let's say that you have a website, and let's say that your website is even part of your e-commerce situation. In other words, you get clients or clients pay you or whatever else on the website. The website's important to your business. I can create little programs, and I can put these programs all over the internet on open servers, and they will start attacking your website. And thousands and thousands and thousands of inquiries on your website start to happen, such that your server, your web service just crashes. And when it's crashed, a legitimate customer, a legitimate client cannot get to you. So close to 5 million of those attacks were in the US just in the first 6 months of 2020. By the end of September in 2020, a staggering 36 billion, that's billion with a B, of records were exposed. That includes your name, your address, your social security number, your telephone, your bank account information, your tax information, your health information. 36 billion. I'm sure there isn't anyone in the country that doesn't have some information of theirs for sale on the dark web because of the amount of breaches that have happened. The breach may not have been against your particular computers, but if you had accounts in Gmail, you had accounts on LinkedIn, you had accounts on Facebook, all of those have been attacked several times, and the data has been stolen and put for sale on the dark web. The average cost to recover from a data breach is around $137,000 per attack. And that's really per machine or per employee. With COVID, everyone started working from home. So you started using your home computer or your work laptop, and you connected to your home internet, and that just left the world wide open for the criminals. So between March and April of 2020, there was an increase of about 400% of attacks. And you don't even know that you were attacked. It takes about an average of 280 days for most people even to realize that they were attacked and data was stolen or money is missing from their bank account or whatever. And about half of the breaches are done through hacking, and there's various ways that criminals hack you. I won't go into too deep today. The second major ticking time bomb is the regulatory environment. So many states have and are adopting cybersecurity laws that are in place to protect consumers. They're not there to protect you or me or Gina. They're there to protect the consumers. So if anything goes wrong, the government is going to hold us accountable for any damage that happened to one of our customers or clients. If you're in healthcare, you are subject to HIPAA. And HIPAA is incredibly large and complex. Even if you're just a small independent psychologist, And you don't think, well, I don't take insurance, HIPAA doesn't affect me. Yes, it does. And even if you write down on a piece of paper someone's name and address and telephone number and keep it in your desk, that very act makes you subject to all the HIPAA regulations. If you're a CPA and you do taxes, you are subject to all of the regulations, not only issued by the IRS, but by the Treasury Department itself. The Securities and Exchange Commission has a whole book of regulations governing people in the financial services industry. California and Oregon have particularly draconian laws that protect consumers, and New York isn't far behind. And then don't even get started with the European Union in the GDPR laws. So if you have any customers overseas, you're going to be subject to those as well. Let's say you run afoul of these laws, even if you didn't know them. For HIPAA, you could be fined up to $50,000 per record that was stolen. So let's say my name, my address, my telephone number, my account number was all stolen. That's $200,000 right there. Most fines approach $1.5 million. So if you're in healthcare and you got fined 1.5 million, I'm sure you'd be out of business. If you're a business in New York, doesn't matter what your business is, doesn't matter how big you are subject to the SHIELD Act. The SHIELD Act puts out a number of standards on how you need to protect your data against cybercrime. And companies can get hit for up to $250,000 per incident. If you're a financial advisor or in the insurance industry in New York or have clients in New York, you're also subject to the New York DFS regulations, which are very, very draconian. Running afoul of any of these and others can put you out of business instantly. So how do you protect yourself? Well, we have cyber insurance. And so like any other insurance, cyber insurance is a risk transfer mechanism. In other words, we're going to transfer the risk from our company to the insurance company. So it limits the amount of money that we're going to have to endure if we get attacked or if we get fined. Now, this is a specialist product. So it's not just like GLI. Most of us can easily get a GLI policy because they've been around for 100 years or more. Everyone knows how they work. Cyber insurance is much more specialized. And since COVID, you are going to be investigated a lot more deeply if you want cyber insurance. Now, it comes by many names: cyber insurance, cybersecurity insurance, cyber liability insurance, cyber risk insurance. There is no difference in that. They're all the same thing. Okay. So what does it cover? So if you have cyber insurance, you can minimize the financial impact from a cyber incident, but is never going to cover all of your costs, and it doesn't resolve your risks. Even if you're insured, the insurance company is going to hold you responsible for having what they call a robust security posture. And if it can be proven that you don't have that posture, they are going to deny your claim. And the language is getting more and more specific in how they will deny claims. What's happened is that since COVID in particular, there have been so many claims on existing policies that the underwriters have taken a step back. And they said, you know what, we're going to cancel policies and we're not going to approve policies unless the company can prove to us that they are following all of the standards for protecting themselves against cybercrime. And the standards are quite lengthy. Now, what doesn't cyber insurance cover? Well, betterment, patent infringement, antitrust, liability insurance, war and terrorism, but it does cover cyber terrorism if you have the right policy. It doesn't cover property damage, and it doesn't cover bodily injury or pollution. This is simply cybercrime. So the question is, you know what, maybe my business should have that. Can I qualify for cyber insurance? My answer today to you is probably not. If you called your insurance agent today and said, I want a cyber insurance policy, he's going to say, okay, I'll send you a book that you need to fill out page by page, and don't call us, we'll call you. So the underwriters are getting very, very picky. And even if you are approved, the premiums could get very, very expensive. So what do you have to do to get cyber insurance today? Well, you have to prove that your company is National Institute of Standards cyber compliant. So the National Institute of Standards has a whole platform. They have a whole domain that says the best companies do this, and therefore you should do this. You have to have the proper technology in place. You have to have written policies and procedures governing your technology, your passwords, how your office is set up, all kinds of things. You have to have an annual risk audit called a risk assessment. And the risk audit is going to expose where there are weaknesses in your environment, and you have to put plans in place to tighten them up. And hopefully the next year when you have the risk audit, you can prove that you've tightened everything up. You have to prove that you comply with all government regulations. You have to prove that you've trained all of your employees at least once a year on cyber hygiene. You have to be able to discuss how you classify your data, zippy lip, top secret, secret, whatever, and how you segment that. You have to have a written incident response plan in place. These are the exact steps that we are going to take if we get attacked, if we get ransomware, or if someone steals information from us. You have to have a formal disaster recovery plan in place. This is a written plan that says, how is the business going to continue given any disaster? There was a fire in your office. A hurricane came through and you were shut down for a month because of no electricity or whatever. So these are all written plans that you have to prove and give copies to the insurance underwriter. And you have to show that you've tested these plans on a regular basis, at least once a year. From a technology standpoint, you have to have what's called a zero trust model. That means I don't care how long your employee has worked for you, we don't trust them. So anytime they access data, they have to prove who they are, and we're going to document that they proved who they are with logs. You need to have more than antivirus in place. You have to have endpoint detection and response systems. These are systems that are provided by companies like me that look at your environment 24/7 and raise a red flag the minute something looks funny. Remember, it's going to take you 280 days to find something went wrong. These systems and these services, such as I provide, tell us immediately. You have to have multi-factor authentication in place. This, and I tell you, I appreciate, because this drives me crazy, all of my systems that manage all of my clients. Every time I log into the system, I have to look on my cell phone and find a 6-digit number and put it in to prove that it's me that's logging into the system. Everything that you do should be MFA inquired as well. You have to have backup in place for everything. You have to have identity and access management in place. How do people log into their computers? How often do they change their passwords? What's the password complexity? And you have to have what's called good patch management to make sure that any time that any one of the pieces of software that you use, it could be your email system, it could be Adobe Acrobat, it could be Word, it could be something specific to your industry. The providers of this software on a daily basis are putting out updates that fix holes, fix problems, increase security, but you have to proactively install these updates. Again, one of the services that companies like me provide is that for you on a 24/7 basis. Now, paperwork and documentation is just as important as the technology. So you have to have a written cybersecurity program. You have to have written cybersecurity policies. You have to designate someone in your company. It could be yourself, or you could hire someone like me to do it. But someone, if the government came in and says, who is your chief information security officer, and you can't point to somebody, you're going to get fined. If you're a larger company, you need to perform penetration testing, and that's expensive. I'll grant you that. You have to have logs. So every time you or an employee does something on your computer, the computer should be logging it and keeping it in a file. So if anything went wrong, we could read that log and say, okay, this is exactly what happened on this date at this time. Okay. And you have to, as I perform these periodic risk assessments. These are formal audit documents that looks at your risk posture and says what you're doing good and what you're not doing good. In summary, cybercrime is real. Over 75% of the attacks in the last 2 years have been against small businesses. Why not against big businesses? Because they are spending millions of dollars to protect themselves. The cyber criminals know that small businesses like ours are not spending the money. And so I can, as a criminal, I can hit up a few dozen small companies every week and make a pretty good living from the crime because they're not protected. The second thing you need to realize is that regulatory compliance is getting more and more burdensome, not less. And if it hasn't come to your industry, it will soon. Cybersecurity has got to be considered as an investment, not a cost. You are investing in your business so that you can survive tomorrow. And you can and should get cyber insurance, and that will transfer the costs of the risk, but it will not cover you if you first don't do everything right, all of those various check marks that I've just talked about. So I'll just do a quick shameless marketing pitch. The Garlic Group provides a complete suite of cyber services. We will do your risk assessments, your audits. We can give you all of your policies and procedures. We can train your employees. We can provide you with incident response plans and disaster recovery plans. We have a complete set of products for remote monitoring and management, for security and intrusion, for patch management, for antivirus and endpoint protection, virtual private networks, and more. So that's my contact information there on the screen. If you want to jot it down, we will be following up with you. And it would be my pleasure, to work with you to get you cyber secure, not just for buying cyber insurance, which would be a byproduct of the process, but having you sleep well tonight, that you are well protected against cybercrime and your business isn't going to go out of business tomorrow. So with that, I'll stop my sharing, and there is a Q&A box. If anybody has any questions, you can type them in there, and we will try and answer them.
Absolutely. And I do want to just let everyone know that we have recorded this webinar today. I see that there were a few people who did register for it who were unable to attend. So we will be distributing it on the recording for those individuals. And if you have any colleagues that you think would benefit from this, please don't hesitate to have them reach out to the firm. We'd be happy to send the recording to them as well. So I don't see that we have any questions here for us, Andy. I think it's a lot to digest.
Yep.
And a lot to go through. So do you have any last parting thoughts or parting words for our attendees?
No, but I will say that both Campanella Law and the Garlic Group's fees are very, very affordable relative to other companies in the marketplace that do similar things. Some of my competitors who really deal with larger companies charge upwards to $50,000 a year to provide the services that we're talking about. Depending on the size of your company, we can probably do it in the $2,000 to $3,000 range.
Absolutely. And yeah, and that's one of the reasons why Campanella Law does recommend the Garlic Group to our clients. Those of you who know me, those of you who don't, one of my passions in opening my own firm was remaining accessible and available to small businesses, small practices, and solos and entrepreneurs. You know, when they don't have thousands and thousands of extra dollars to be spending on critical legal services, critical insurances, and critical cybersecurity support. So that's one of the reasons why Campanella Law works very closely with the Garlic Group, because I know that it is a passion of both of ours.
Indeed.
So thank you so much, Andy, for being here.
Well, thank
and
you.
Thank you to all of our attendees for joining us. And we hope that everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you.